Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that you've been able to join us today. I am the Commissioner of the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, Lori Cumbo. Thank you so much. We are happy to welcome you to the first webinar we're hosting for the Fiscal Year 2025 Cultural Development Fund cycle. No city in America invests in culture quite like New York City, and our city is so much richer, more vibrant, resilient, and dynamic for it, and because of you. We are so proud to be the safest city in America. We are a healthier city. That's why the Adams administration makes it a priority to invest in your work. I know what it's like to be in your seat. I have been both a recipient as well as a panelist. I founded my own not-for-profit organization in Brooklyn, New York. We started out with a very, very, very small budget, and we continue to grow each and every year. But that first Department of Cultural Affairs grant really made a huge difference in our ability to grow as an organization. It gave us that validity that so many organizations need in order to leverage other funding sources. And so I understand the importance of what a DCLA grant means to your organization, to your community, and we are here to help you and to go through this entire process with you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for doing the work that you do every single day. You have shown up, done extraordinary work to bring New York City back during very challenging times. And you are here with the great hands of the DCLA programs team. They are doing everything possible to make sure that this process is as seamless as it possibly can be for each and every one of you. And I also want to let you know that we are looking for panelists on a regular basis. We want to make sure that we have panelists from every single corner of New York City. We want to make sure that the panels are as diverse as the city of New York is. So we hope that you all will also consider that opportunity as well. And please consider the opportunity to serve. Thank you all so very much. Thank you for your participation today. And we look forward to helping you and to assist you through this really incredible opportunity. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Before we get started, I'd like to give a big thank you to Battery Dance for contributing footage from their annual Battery Dance Festival. I hope you all enjoyed the energetic performance from this free waterside dance festival in Battery Park featuring Carolyn Dorfman dance. So let's do a quick sound check. If you are able to hear me, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. Oh, I'm seeing so many raised hands. Fantastic. Okay. Officially welcome to the Fiscal 2025 Cultural Development Fund Application Seminar. I'm Ladan Hamidi Tusi. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a co-director here at the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in the Program Services Unit. I'm going to turn my video on to give you a brief visual description. I am wearing a sort of collared white shirt. I've dark glasses, dark hair up in a bun, and Southwest Asian descent. And behind me is a fancy blue cultural affairs background that we just started using for these kinds of events. So welcome to everyone today. I'm going to turn my video off for the rest of the presentation. As an employee of the City of New York, I acknowledge with gratitude the ancient and current stewards of the lands and waters we currently know as the 5 boroughs, which have been cared for over millennia by the Lenape, Canarsie, Schaghticoke, Matinecock, Wappinger people. We also recognize that New York City has one of the largest urban Native American indigenous populations in the United States. My fellow presenters and DCLA program staff behind the scenes will work together to present this webinar and answer your questions. This seminar will provide an overview to guide you on submitting an eligible application to the Department of Cultural Affairs for fiscal year 2025. If you have not done so already, we suggest you download the CDF guidelines, the CDF application worksheet, and the budget worksheet, and we've included those links in the chat for this webinar. These documents will be referenced throughout the presentation, and we'll go into more depth about how they can be used. I'm going to ask for the next slide, please. A note on accessibility: we've created this presentation with accessibility in mind. For a live transcript of this webinar, please click on the closed caption icon at the bottom of your window. A copy of this presentation that is accessible by screen readers may be requested via email to disabilityfacilitator@culture.nyc.gov. You can also find this email in the chat. And as mentioned before, the application worksheets can be downloaded from our website. They contain the complete text of the application, both questions and instructions, as well as a budget template. We'd like to let all attendees know that this event will be recorded. It is currently being recorded. This webinar will be posted with closed captioning on DCLA's YouTube channel in the coming days. DCLA will link to this video from our website and may use all or part of the recording in the future or authorize others to use it for non-commercial purposes consistent with our mission. If you do not wish for your name to be included in this recording, please direct all communications to CDF Help Desk at culture.nyc.gov rather than using the Q&A feature of this presentation. If you do not wish to have your name visible to other participants or potential future viewers, we recommend that you exit this virtual event at this time and attend a webinar on a different date where we will not be recording, or watch the recording on our website when it's posted. Once we've gone over the webinar agenda, which will be in the next 2 slides, please use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen for questions, not the chat. Use the Q&A function, please. Behind the scenes, we will monitor your questions throughout the webinar and reserve time to answer them in batches. Next slide, please.
¿Tiene alguna pregunta en español? Puede pedir asistencia en español enviando un email al helpdesk al cdfhelpdesk@culture.nyc.gov. Su pregunta será contestada por uno de los program officers que hablan español lo más rápido posible.
Okay, so we've divided this presentation into several sections. I will give you an overview of the FY25 CDF grant cycle, share goals and recent outcomes of the CDF process, and discuss City Council support and how it may relate to your FY25 CDF application. My colleagues Claudia Arzeno and Dylan Pickus will then discuss guidelines and eligibility and the online application form itself. We're going to pause for questions throughout and hold time at the end to answer any outstanding questions. If your query is related to any of the aforementioned areas, please hold into the applicable section to ask your question. It will likely be covered. If you have a question that is specific to your organization, our behind the scenes programs team will answer you directly. And if your question is more broadly applicable, they'll note it so we can respond to it live during the webinar so that everyone can benefit from your question. Don't be shy, use that Q&A function. I see questions are already coming in, great. And we do strongly suggest that you stay for the entire presentation. Next slide, please. DCLA will accept proposals in every artistic discipline and from all areas within New York City for services that take place within the 5 boroughs and within the city's fiscal year 25. It's July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. The fundamental requirement for all proposals is that they represent a cultural activity of recognized quality that is accessible to the New York City public during the grant period. Funded services can be as different as the organizations providing them, but they will all have a common commitment to public service and public participation. Next slide, please. So CDF is a grant. Grants fall on a cycle. Here is our cycle. The application became available on Monday, May 20th, and the deadline to submit is Thursday, June 27th at 5 p.m. That is probably the most important piece of information to take away is don't miss that deadline. There are no exceptions to it. And so we also are showing you a little bit more about what happens once the CDF applications are submitted. DCLA program staff review those applications, and we confirm that each applicant's borough, discipline, and FY22 income are correctly indicated. And we also check that all applicants are eligible and make sure that all of the required supplemental materials were submitted so that your application is both complete and eligible. After the applications are confirmed as complete and apportioned to a panel, sort of assigned to an individual panel, then we send those applications for panelists to read and review. And we are absolutely accepting submissions for prospective panelists through our website. So please consider participating as a panelist. You are the peers in the peer panel review. And you can submit yourself as a potential panelist at the link in the chat. DCLA's budget will be confirmed around the beginning of the fiscal year on July 1, and panels will convene in late summer and into the fall this year. Once they conclude, funding recommendations will be made according to the applicant's budget category and panel score percentile. The commissioner then reviews and approves funding allocations, and notifications of the outcome of the process will be sent via email in the winter. This year, we're looking at hopefully by December. Further paperwork will be required of grantees, and typically 80% of your award is paid out as an initial payment and 20% upon completion of services once you submit your final report at the end of the year, though payment schedules may vary in some instances. Grantees are also required to report on their CDF funded activities every year. Online reporting forms become available around the end of the grant period, which is the city's fiscal year, around mid to late June, and CDF final reports are due August 1st. Next slide, please. So New York City, we are really proud of being the largest municipal arts funder in the country. We go through this competitive score-based peer panel facilitated CDF process to help us realize our mandate to support a cultural community that reflects our city's immense diversity and truly serves every resident. As this is a competitive process, funding is not guaranteed year after year outside of a multi-year grant commitment with a renewal baseline funding commitment. Our values of accessibility, equity, adaptability, advocacy, and accountability guide the CDF process to ensure fair and equitable distribution of CDF funds. So a couple of highlights from the last year, or the current year, technically, FY24 CDF process can include that we continue to fund a high percentage of applicants. 76% of groups that submitted eligible annual or renewal applications received CDF baseline funding. Our minimum award of $10,000 enhanced support for smaller organizations. You'll recall this minimum went up a couple of years ago, and we additionally increased the number of budget categories to recognize the needs of groups with a variety of budget sizes. In 24, for the first time, 2/3 of our grantees were in a renewal and received funding as part of their multi-year award. These grantees represented all budget categories, including organizations with budgets as small as $25,000 or less. Previously, only organizations with budgets of over $250,000 were eligible for multi-year grants, and those guarantee a base level support for groups in a renewal cycle and offer greater stability. So now all groups of all budget sizes that receive CDF baseline awards in the last 3 years have access to this stabilizing support. If you want to learn more about the history and goals of these CDF policies, please do visit our website. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to take a step back from CDF application and away from that for the portion of the presentation and give you a little bit of an overview of City Council discretionary funding, because as a city agency, this is a big part of what we do, and we do allocate City Council funds through our agency. So how does that happen? This Department of Cultural Affairs is overseen by the mayor and works closely with our partners in the City Council to ensure compliance, inform policy, and administer funds, among other work. The New York City Council consists of an elected representative from each of the 51 council districts comprising the 5 boroughs. And you can visit the City Council website to identify the council members for the districts where you provide services and where you're based, and be in touch with their offices to learn more about any unique requirements they might have, or just to let them know that you're doing work in their district. The support and partnership of the City Council, its speaker, and its Cultural Affairs Committee is critical to our funding process. They devote considerable funding to culture throughout the 5 boroughs, so it is recommended that you keep them informed of your events and programs, both to seek funds and to report on your activities. DCLA administers several different and distinct funds for cultural activities that are sort of City Council discretionary funding. In order to be eligible for any discretionary council support that is administered by DCLA, your organization must submit both a City Council discretionary funding application, which was due back in February, and a complete and eligible FY25 CDF application. The CDF application is our core grant-making program and is required for any grants our agency administers. If you don't submit this application, your organization will not be eligible to receive any funds through DCLA in this fiscal year, though you can absolutely receive funds through another city agency. It's just one of the prerequisites for getting any money through the Department of Cultural Affairs. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about city council discretionary support that we administer, it usually takes one of two sort of main forms. We're going to call one of them member item support and the other initiative support. And in this slide, I'm going to explain the member item awards, and in the following slide, discuss the 5 council initiatives that we administer. So when we're talking about member items, we're talking about the regular funding that the city council may designate. They have it for any kind of like nonprofit cultural organizations or any other kinds of organizations working in their district. Each individual member has money, and then they can designate cultural organizations for support in their council district. So that's what we call member item support. And when these member items are administered through DCLA, they get included with a CDF award, and therefore must support the projects proposed in your CDF application. Next slide, please. So in addition to the discretionary support that gets allocated to CDF through these member items, the City Council has also created a number of specific initiatives which provide single-year support for specific purposes. For fiscal 24, these included CASA, the Cultural After-School Adventures Program, Coalition of Theaters of Color, or CTC, the Cultural Immigrant Initiative, SUCASA, and Art, a Catalyst for Change, the Anti-Gun Violence Initiative. So while the City Council designs these initiatives and designates who will receive funds under them, our agency administers the money. And unlike member items that I described earlier, these initiative-funded projects are not the same, cannot be the same as any CDF-funded activities. So don't include them in your CDF application. And again, to be eligible for any council support that is designated through DCLA, whether for CDF activities or for one or more of the council initiatives, you're required to complete both the FY25 CDF application and the council's discretionary funding application. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause here. I'm going to turn my camera back on, and I'm going to answer any questions that have been flagged to be answered live. Let's see, what do we have? Okay, so the first question that has been flagged to answer live, it says, is an organization considered ineligible if arts and cultural services have been delivered outside of the city but within the state over the last 2 years? I think that you would not be super, yeah, I think that this is definitely something where the arts and cultural track record that you want to display is the one, it should be one that is in New York City. So I think that this would be, it would be appropriate for the organization in this situation to establish that 2-year track record of arts and cultural services in New York City before you apply. All right, the next question that's been flagged for me to answer, if we miss the February deadline, can we still apply for the June deadline? Okay, so I think that this person is asking if they did not submit the City Council discretionary funding application back in February, can you still submit the CDF application that's due in June? Absolutely. City Council funding is just one part of it. Hundreds of organizations don't get any of that money. It's not really the main purpose of the CDF process. And we're going to address this later too, but City Council funding is not a prerequisite. It is not required. You do not have to even bother with any of that if you don't want to. You can just submit the CDF application and apply for CDF funding and go through the panel process and see what happens. So you don't have to, if you miss the February deadline for City Council discretionary funding, but you want to apply for CDF funding directly to us by the June deadline, yes, you can absolutely do that. Let's see, if we haven't applied for city discretionary funding in FY24, for February 2024, does that mean we can't get CDF funding in FY 2025? As I just mentioned, yes, Laurel, no. They are completely separate. They do not have to overlap. If you didn't apply for City Council discretionary funding, if you don't care about City Council discretionary funding, no worries. You can still get CDF funding in FY25 as long as you are eligible and you submit a complete and eligible application by the June 27th deadline. All right. I think there's a couple other questions that are along these lines. So I think if anybody asked about discretionary funding, if you didn't submit that application back in February, blanket responses, it doesn't matter. That's only if you want city council discretionary money. If you don't want city council discretionary money, it doesn't matter if you did anything back in February for them. But if you want money from the Department of Cultural Affairs, you have to submit the CDF application by the June 27th deadline. So if you missed one, but you're ready for this, it's okay. Are there any other questions for me to answer live? Okay. I think that every other question that has been flagged for me to answer live is a variation on this same theme. So I think we've covered that. And unless there's any others, I think let's pick back up with the rest of the webinar. I'm gonna now hand it over to my colleague, Claudia Arzeno, who will resume our focus on the actual CDF application and our grant process.
Thank you, Lauden. Next slide, please. Okay, let me turn on my camera so you can see me for a second. Hello, my name is Claudia Arzeno. I am the Director of Program Administration here at DCLA. My pronouns are she, her. To give you a little visual description of myself, I am a Puerto Rican woman with dark brown hair, brown eyes. My hair is up in a bun, and I am wearing a green shirt with gold buttons on it. I'm going to turn my camera off until we do questions and continue on. The following are the basic requirements for eligibility for CDF funding. Your organization must be either a not-for-profit arts and cultural organization or a not-for-profit organization for which arts and culture is a component of a broader mission. You must have successfully delivered arts and cultural services in New York City for the last 2 consecutive years. You need to be based in New York City and be able to demonstrate administrative and programmatic operations within any of the 5 boroughs of New York City. We determine your administrative address using your IRS 990, 501c3 letter, and other publicly available information. You must also possess a unique federal employee identification number, which is also called an EIN. You are required to be certified as tax exempt under Internal Revenue Service Code Section 501c3, or be an incorporated not-for-profit that uses a DCLA pre-approved New York State incorporated tax-exempt fiscal sponsor. Only not-for-profit organizations are eligible to apply, regardless of whether they use a fiscal sponsor. So if you're not a not-for-profit incorporated in New York State, even if you use a fiscal sponsor, you are not eligible to apply. And as I said, you must be incorporated in New York State, and that should be no later than the organization's fiscal year ending in 2022. And finally, you need to be compliant with annual state and federal filing requirements for not-for-profit organizations, including New York State Charities Bureau filings. Organizations whose incorporation dates are in fiscal year 23 or fiscal year 24 are not eligible for this cycle. In this case, organizations must wait until they have a 2-year history to apply for CDF. For support in fiscal year 25, these organizations should explore the DCLA regrant program administered by the local arts council in their borough. Contact information for the arts councils can be found on the DCLA website. Next slide, please. Crucially, if you have not provided services in arts and culture in both of the last 2 years and cannot demonstrate related income and expenses, you are not eligible to apply in fiscal year 25. Also, applicants cannot be individual artists or unincorporated artist collective. There are DCLA regrant funds administered by local arts councils on our behalf that are dedicated to individual artists. You must be incorporated as a not-for-profit, as I said. Any other type of incorporated entity, which includes limited liability corporations, benefit corporations, limited partnerships, are not eligible even if you apply with a fiscal sponsor. The following types of organizations are not eligible to apply: parent-teacher associations or organizations, nonprofit organizations with chapters, offices, branches, or general activity in New York City, but that are administratively based outside of New York City, members of DCLA's Cultural Institutions Group, programs of city, state, or federal agencies, libraries or degree granting institutions, including schools, colleges, and universities. A note on this bullet point: if your organization is closely affiliated with such institutions, you should contact DCLA prior to applying to determine eligibility. Finally, organizations that are not in compliance with DCLA's previous grant reporting requirements are not eligible to apply. If you have questions about your organization's eligibility, please take our eligibility quiz, which is linked in the chat and on our website. If you have further questions regarding your eligibility, please make sure you contact your program officer if you have one, or the help desk well in advance of the June 27th deadline. You can find the help desk email address in the chat, on the DCLA website, and in the guidelines. Next slide, please. We do consider applications from organizations whose primary mission is other than arts and culture. They are typically social and/or multi-service organizations, religious institutions, or organizations providing general non-arts education. We refer to these as non-arts and culture organizations. If you are an organization whose mission is to provide arts education, this doesn't apply to you. If you are a non-arts and culture organization, you must have offered documented cultural programming over the past 2 years, provide written proof of any annual filing exemptions, enter the budget for your cultural activities in the application, and also submit your full organizational budget in a separate template. Your application will be reviewed based on the portion of your fiscal year 22 operating income that relates to your cultural activities. It is imperative that you have separate financial and programmatic information available for the cultural component of your organization for all fiscal years since 2022. If you are not sure if your organization has this, please confirm with your bookkeeper that you can provide the required information prior to the June 27th deadline. Next slide, please. Please note these specific policies regarding CDF funding. Organizations may request support for a single project only. No more than 75% of the total project costs may come from DCLA. And if funded, organizations are expected to complete all programming as proposed regardless of the amount awarded. Remember, while applicants request funding for unique programs and are evaluated on their public services, funds received from the CDF can be used to cover any operating costs, such as staff salaries, space rentals, and insurance costs, spent in the execution of the project, except for capital expenditures, government advocacy efforts, and fundraising. Next slide, please. Public access during fiscal 2025 is the key component of activities funded by CDF. The guidelines contain a longer list of examples, but here are a few examples of activities CDF can fund. The creation of new work and/or restoration of existing work for public presentation. Arts education programs. Community-based cultural activities. Services that assist New York City's artists and arts organizations. Training programs. Presentation of works in progress. Virtual programs with a clear artistic service provided to New York City audiences. DCLA can fund any of these activities if the public access falls between July 1st, 2024 and June 30th, 2025, and within the 5 boroughs of New York City. Remember that funding received via the Department of Cultural Affairs must be for publicly accessible activities that are cultural in nature. We do include the humanities and natural sciences in our definition of culture, but we don't include physical fitness, social services, or general education like homework help. Please submit a question via the Q&A function or email your program officer or the help desk if you have questions about the eligibility of your project. Next slide, please. Keep in mind what we don't fund. Do not ask DCLA to support activities outside of the city's fiscal year or outside of the 5 boroughs. We expect you to fundraise, but we cannot fund you to do so. Capital projects, including equipment purchases and construction, fall under a different unit at DCLA. Please email capitalrequest@culture.nyc.gov for information about the capital unit. This email is also in the chat. Lobbying or other governmental advocacy can be helpful for organizations to receive funding from elected officials, but CDF funds may not be used toward those efforts. DCLA also does not fund proposals for internal capacity building. You must propose projects that provide services to the public. This also means we do not fund general operating support. Your CDF proposed projects cannot include activities funded by City Council initiatives administered through this agency, such as CASA or the Cultural Immigrant Initiative. Next slide, please. Your FY25 application will be evaluated on 3 criteria. You may notice that the percentages have changed slightly. For FY25, 35% of your score will be calculated on your application's evidence of public service and impact. Applications that score highly on this criterion are providing arts and/or cultural programming in the 5 boroughs of New York City during the grant period, with consideration toward accessibility, affordability, and equity. 35% of your score will be calculated on your application's evidence of organizational accountability. Applications that score highly on this criterion show that their organizations demonstrate accountability, sustainability, and the capacity to provide cultural programs that are accessible, equitable, realistic, and relevant to their mission, focus, and audiences served. 30% of your score will be calculated based on evidence of quality in the execution of your proposed cultural programs. Consideration is informed by a relative standard that is appropriate to the participants in those disciplines and genres, and not in comparison to any single standard of excellence. Please see the guidelines for a full description of the evaluative criteria. You will see the application sections align closely with this evaluative criteria. Refer to the guidelines for more information about how the panelists use the different sections to assess your application against the evaluative criteria. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see the minimum and maximum awards determined by panel score in each budget category. The competitive panel review will generate a final panel score percentile for each proposal. After DCLA's FY25 budget is adopted, available funding will be used to determine the percentage of applicants funded. DCLA intends to continue to fund a high percentage of applicants. As you can see, we've added a new budget category for groups with FY22 operating budgets between 1.5 and 3 million. First-time grantees, which are defined as applicants that have not received a CDF baseline award in at least one of the last 6 fiscal years, are only eligible for a 1-year $10,000 baseline award, regardless of budget size. This is new for fiscal year 25. Returning grantees will be awarded the minimum allocation in their budget category, plus additional funding determined by their panel score percentile. The total panel award will not exceed the maximum listed here. Please note that organizations with budgets under $25,000 are only eligible for a $10,000 award. Additional funds may be added according to agency priorities post-adoption, including for targeted funding sources such as the Language Access Fund, also known as LAF, and the Disability Forward Fund, also known as DFF. Next slide, please. Please note the multi-year award policy has changed. If you did not receive a CDF baseline award within any of the 3 prior fiscal years, this would be fiscal year 22, 23, or 24, then you are only eligible for a single year award. If you received at least a CDF baseline award within the last 3 fiscal years, you are eligible for a 3-year award. Recipients of 3-year awards must submit a complete and eligible renewal application for years 2 and 3 by the required renewal application date. Renewal applications are not subject to panel review. Next slide, please. Okay, let me turn my camera on, and I'm going to now pause to answer any questions that you may have. Okay, let's see. We had to cut back on the public programming during COVID and have only managed to do a fraction of our previous programming since due to budget cuts. Can we submit previous cultural public programming from 2017 to 2019 as proof of previous programming? So you should really have previous activities that are from 22 onward to include in your application. And you do need to have income and expenses for the past 2 years as well in order for you to be able to submit an eligible and complete application. You can definitely talk about what you've done in the past in the mission and section, where you can talk about what your principal activities are, but you do need to have had activity in the past 2 years in order to be eligible. Okay, next question. My organization had lower than expected revenues in 2022 due to ramping up operations after COVID. And as such, we are in a lower bracket than we otherwise would be and are therefore unable to apply for more than the minimum amount. Is there a way to ask for an exception to this revenue bracket based on our FY23 and FY24 revenue? No, there is not. Everyone needs to be, unfortunately, on an equal playing field. So we do FY22 for everybody. Would a season of programming count as one project if it involves different types of events? Yes, you can definitely do a season of programming as one project in your application. Just make sure that you were able to include enough detail about every portion of your season so that the panelists have a good idea of what's actually going to happen during the fiscal year. If an organization is awarded LMCC funding for this fiscal year, does that prevent them from receiving DCLA funding? It actually depends when your activity is taking place, the proposed activity in the application, and when the LMCC funding was for. So if it was for 2024 and the proposed activity that in your application is for, say, the spring of 25, then that would be okay, but it cannot overlap. Okay, next question. So if our operating budget is 1.8 million, the max we can receive is $80,000. Yes. But that does not include any city council discretionary funding that might be added to your award if you did apply for city council funding. Okay, next question. Since FY25 funding baselines are determined by income expenses and FY22 990, how do cultural programs at non-arts organizations provide backup on budget size? We've obviously got our cultural program budget, but the data is not broken out in the 990. So you will submit your 990 and we will, make sure that you're in compliance in terms of any financial documents that you needed to have gotten because of your budget size, your whole budget size. But then you also have to submit the organizational budget, which is a supplementary budget. And the second page of that asks for a breakout of your FY22 cultural budget. And that is what we're going to use to place you both in the panel. And if you are awarded, then that is how we will calculate your minimum and maximum award. Okay, the fund. Okay, I think that is it for questions that we are answering live. I will now hand it over to my colleague, Dylan Pickus. Next slide, please.
Hello, everybody. Just turning on my camera quickly to introduce myself. As Claudia mentioned, I'm Dylan Pickus. I'm a program officer here at DCLA. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a white man in his 30s wearing a blue button down and also sitting against the lovely blue background for DCLA. I'm going to turn my camera off as I go through the slides. The FY25 CDF application is a user-friendly online application that uses the Salesforce CRM system. The application accepts video and audio links as part of your background materials and so much more. All supplemental materials must be uploaded directly into the online form itself. If you encounter a technical issue, please submit the IT support form. The link for this form can be found on our website. Next slide, please. This slide shows the login page for the CDF application portal found on the Grants for Organizations section of the DCLA website, which Courtney has just put into the chat for us. For organizations that have never applied to the Department of Cultural Affairs for funding, users can register for a new account by clicking the Register New Account button. Also in the chat, you'll see a link to the registration help guide. This can also be found on the DCLA website under About CDF/registration. You can use this guide for step-by-step instructions on how to set up an account for a new organization, add and remove users, and register for NYC ID. Next slide, please. On this slide is a screenshot of the NYC ID login page. This is the screen you will see when you launch the application from the DCLA website. Please enter your email and password to access your CDF account. Our online security policies are aligned with the NYC ID, New York City's centralized public identity management system. New and returning users will use NYC ID to log into their DCLA CDF account. For more information on registration and NYC ID, I'm going to point you again to that registration help guide from our website. That link is in the chat once more. Next slide, please. After you've logged in, you will be taken to the grants management dashboard for your organization. This slide includes a screenshot of that page, which shows your contact name, the organization's name, a navigation toolbar on the left, and all currently open grant applications. The first step for every registered applicant is to review the user information in your organization's account for accuracy and completeness. You can view this information by clicking User Management on the left-hand navigation bar. It is critical for all organizations to keep their account profile and registration information current at all times. Please refer to the registration help guide for instructions on how to add, remove, and edit users. This portal is where all engagement with the CDF process will occur. Only your active users will receive correspondence, and the grants management dashboard will be Grand Central Terminal for all document management. Next slide, please. When adding or editing users, it is important to note that to start your application, you must identify a user as an executive director by checking the executive director box in the user management section here. There, you see us pointing to it. Okay, next slide, please. This is a screenshot of the launch page of the CDF application. As you see, the application is in 5 sections, plus the final step section, each of which can be accessed by clicking the Get Started red button on the right. The application and its sections are designed to align with the evaluative criteria. You must complete the organization information section first, and you need to complete the first 5 sections before continuing to the final step section to submit your application. Some other things to remember. You will be logged out automatically after 30 minutes of inactivity. Please note, typing and selecting answers does not count as activity. So 30 minutes of inactivity is navigating back and forth between pages or sections. We encourage you to disable any pop-up blockers to make sure that you receive an alert prior to being logged out automatically so you do not lose work. Up to 5 users can work on separate sections of the application at once. However, multiple users cannot be working in the same section at the same time. Instructions for your responses will appear in a blue box below the question. Not all questions have these instructions. Character count limits appear at the end of the question. Once you begin a section, it will be marked as in progress until complete. The form does not automatically save. You will need to click the Save button at the top to save your application at any time, or the Save and Next button at the bottom to both save and navigate to the next page. Clicking Previous or Next at the top of the page will also save your work. Clicking Exit will bring you to the home screen. To complete a section, you need to click the Finish button at the end of the section. This will mark the section as complete on the home page. We're going to play this video, and you can see a video demonstration of this next point on your screen. All sections remain editable until you submit the application. However, if you edit a complete section, it will change back to an in-progress status. So you see we've navigated into organizational accountability here. We're going to make a change. We're changing this, save and next. And then we're navigating out. And now it is in progress again, no longer complete. Once you've made your edits, you should use the sidebar to go to the end and click Finish to mark it as complete again. Great. All questions with an asterisk are required. If the question doesn't apply to you, type 0 or NA. Do not submit your application in the 6th section called Final Steps until you are sure the application is ready for submission. You cannot change or edit your application after hitting the Submit Application button. Be sure to review the entire application before submitting, especially since multiple users can work on it at once. So, for example, if you've typed into a text box, staff will fill this in later, that will register as an answered question, and you will not receive an error message before you submit. So make sure you really double check everything before you hit submit, because once you have, we do not allow any edits to the application. Once you submit the application, the active users listed on your account will get a confirmation email automatically, which contains a link to an optional post-application survey. Save this email for your records. If you do not receive the confirmation, check your junk mail folder and make sure that you actually submitted the application. Next slide, please. A few tips as you begin your application. Refer to the definitions and examples of the evaluative criteria provided in the guidelines. These criteria will be used by the panelists to assess your application, and your application must speak to them directly. Each of the criteria include instructions to show your equity and accessibility activity and plans in terms of your public programming and your organizational structure. We recognize that every organization is at a particular point in this arc, and we expect you to accurately show your current state as well as your aspiration, including evidence of how you plan on achieving your goals. Be sure to include your organization's actual mission statement and ensure that your proposed project clearly fulfills that mission. Include as many details as you can about the audience currently served by your organization, as well as the audience that you intend to serve with your proposed project. Describe how you will reach that audience during the full arc of your program, meaning before, during, and after as applicable. Include previous activities that relate to the project in your proposal to give a sense of your experience presenting these types of cultural programs. Next slide, please. A few tips as you craft your project proposal specifically. Remember, the focus of CDF support is artistic and cultural services to the public. As we've discussed a little bit, organizations may request support for one project, which should contain a level of detail that is responsive to all the criteria for funding, which again are public service and impact, organizational accountability, and quality. In determining the proposed programming and crafting the descriptions entered in this section, please be mindful of the available character limits and how best to present a clear, comprehensive description of all elements within the space provided. If your project contains multiple components, make sure they each have the requisite amount of detail. We look to the applicant to define its public and describe the access that it provides. It's up to you to clearly define the public you are serving. DCLA funds projects of both breadth and depth. Those that reach a broad range of people, as well as those that provide a depth of service for a small number of people. Your public could be anything from 5 participants in a series of workshops, to 200 people at an outdoor presentation, to 1,000 New York City school children attending a virtual concert. One of the ways to demonstrate public service and impact is to include the goals you have set for your proposed project in the project description, along with a evaluative methods you plan to use to measure impact. If your organization has provided the same or similar services in the past, you may include metrics such as quantitative and/or qualitative data to help highlight the program outcomes. We understand that some specifics might not be confirmed when the application is due or submitted. When this is the case, be sure to include as much detail as you can regarding what steps you will take and how you will make the decisions that will make the project a reality, including when key decisions will be made and who the key decisions makers are. The how is just as important as the what. Next slide, please. A few tips for the presentation of your project. I refer to this as a Goofus and Gallant slide. In the screen, you'll see 2 identical texts. The one on the left includes paragraph breaks, and information is highlighted by the judicious use of capital letters. On the right is a dense paragraph peppered with ampersands and abbreviations, but containing exactly the same information. The one on the left allows the reader, in this case the panelist, to find key information on the page. The other makes it far too difficult to do that, making it harder for panelists to read. Make sure that your text is easily legible. Use appropriate spacing and paragraph breaks, which only count as a single character. And note that some formatting tools, such as bold, italics, and underline, are unavailable in the application. If you copy and paste, the text may not appear as you entered it in a word processing program. You can use the gray Download PDF button found at the top of the page to preview what the text looks like and edit accordingly. Also, do not embed links in your narrative. We have designated space for links in the supplemental material section of the application. Next slide, please. A few tips on the budget specifically. The application requires budgets for your overall organization and for your specific project you're proposing. The organizational budgets reflect your fiscal year. The project budgets reflect the city's fiscal year, which is July 1st to June 30th. We suggest working on your budget offline first. You can use your own Excel document or the budget worksheet we mentioned and linked to earlier. The application form times out after 30 minutes, so be sure to save. You don't want to get closed out in the middle of figuring out your budget. Again, typing does not count as activity. So if you're just on the budget page and entering numbers, that is not activity. Please save constantly. The CDF request amount will be drawn from your figure you enter in your project budget under Department of Cultural Affairs/CDF. You will see this pre-populated as the DCLA project request in the project section. A reminder, DCLA cannot fund more than 75% of the total cost of a project. To be competitive for funding, the total request amount should be between the minimum and maximum award amount for your organization's budget category as outlined earlier in this webinar and in the guidelines. Be sure to list an actual request. If you request $0, your application will be disqualified and will not be reviewed by the panelists, and you will not receive a CDF baseline award. That's very important. Make sure that you are entering something in the Department of Cultural Affairs/CDF line item so that you list an actual request. Received or projected City Council initiative income should not be listed in your project budget. As we discussed earlier, those awards must not overlap with your CDF programs. However, you should include those awards in your organizational budget. You can click the red Budget Overview button at the top of the organizational budget section to review all the budgets next to each other. Next slide, please. Following recommendations made in the Create NYC Cultural Plan released in July 2017, the Language Access Fund, or LAF, and Disability Forward Fund, or DFF, were launched to support both new and ongoing programmatic efforts to engage New Yorkers in these communities. There is currently no additional application for either LAF or DFF support. If available, funds added at adoption will be awarded to eligible CDF-funded projects to meet these criteria. There are questions in the CDF application which allow you to identify your interest in receiving LAF or DFF. To be considered for the funds, you must both answer these specific questions. And just a note, those answers will not be shared with the panelists. And you must describe your related activities in the project description section of your application. Next slide, please. A competitive application, is comprehensive. The components should interrelate, making sense and holistically describe both your organization and your proposed project. The evaluative criteria of public service and impact, organizational accountability, and quality should be reflected throughout your application. Panelists are also looking for your application to demonstrate your commitment to access, equity, and inclusion, meaning meeting the evaluative criteria and descriptions throughout the application of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility efforts, as well as programmatic audience engagement, staffing, and financial plans. In other words, think of the evaluative criteria and that commitment to access, equity, and inclusion in your application as the cinnamon in your oatmeal raisin cookie, as in it's peppered throughout, not the raisins, as in you could easily pick it out. Next slide, please. As you think about how to tell the story of your organization and project, it might also be helpful to note that the order of the application content seen by panelists differs slightly from how you will enter it online. On this slide and the next are screenshots of the quote-unquote panelist view. We are sharing these so you can see how the information is presented to the panelists. Next slide, please. To see how the panelists will receive your application information, please refer to the sample panelist view document in the application resources section of our application webpage. We're also going to add that link to the chat so you can access it here. Next slide, please. Remember, a complete application must include the submission of digital supplemental documentation. Consult the application and the guidelines to determine your required supplemental documentation. Remember, please submit a 990 for the fiscal year that ended in 2022. Your organizational budget will determine what FY25 financial statement, if any, is required. If you're a non-arts and culture organization, complete the organizational budget template. Next slide, please. Background materials are required for all applications. They should establish your arts and culture public engagement over at least the past 3 years. Upload a PDF of no more than 10 pages and include the dates of the referenced activities. Your PDF should not include hyperlinks. The materials can include, but are certainly not limited to, photos, playbills, press, marketing materials, letters of recommendation, curricula, testimonials, and artist biographies. Next slide, please. Work samples, on the other hand, are optional and are meant to allow you to showcase your best programming relevant to your CDF project proposal. Work samples can be one of 3 things. First, they can be a 2-page PDF of images or creative writing. Your PDF should not include hyperlinks. Second, they can be links to specific programmatic web pages or social media posts. Third, they can be Vimeo and/or YouTube links showing audio or visual work. You can include up to 2 work samples. Links to materials must be publicly accessible through summer 2024. Actually, make that publicly accessible through fall 2024 and not password protected. Physical work samples sent to the DCLA office and our links that require login or passwords will not be considered for panel review. File folders and downloadable files on cloud-based storage platforms such as Dropbox or Google Drive will not go to panel review either. Panelists will be instructed to spend up to 2 minutes reviewing each submitted work sample. New this year, there's also a text field available for you to describe any submitted work sample and/or direct the panelist to a specific part of a submitted clip. Next slide, please. If your organization is funded, notification will take place after the grant period has begun. This year, you will not know if you've been awarded funds until the winter, even for programs that take place in the summer, so please plan accordingly. We expect each grantee to move forward with the activities proposed, regardless of the size of the DCLA award or the timing of our payments. Funds may not move as swiftly as you or even we would like, and we appreciate your understanding. Generally, 80% is paid as early in the fiscal year as possible, and the remaining 20% is paid out only upon completion of services and approval of final reports. In some years, there were budget adjustments mid-year that increased or decreased awards slightly. Those adjustments are made when we issue final payments. Next slide, please. Funded applicants are expected to have adequate insurance to cover their activities. We expect you to be ADA compliant. Funded organizations must also follow DCLA's policy for acknowledging the receipt of these funds by including the DCLA logo and appropriate credit language in digital and printed materials. Next slide, please. I want to give you one last reminder that everything we just covered needs to be submitted by 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Thursday, June 27th, 2024, to meet the application deadline and be eligible for funding. Remember, this is only the last day that you can submit. You don't have to wait. In fact, we encourage you to not wait until the last minute to submit. I'm going to answer some questions. Okay, this is a question. Thanks to Esther for answering my previous question. I had to follow. If we receive a $10,000 baseline award for FY 2024 as a first-time recipient, can we then apply for a baseline award in our operating income bracket in FY 26? Yes, that is correct. The $10,000 baseline award for first-time recipients is for 1 year only, and is for 1 year only, and it's just for those first-time recipients. So in your second year, if you're funded, I'm sorry, I'm going to turn on. If you are funded, if you're funded in FY25 and you apply again in FY26, you will you will not be a first time, and your baseline award will be determined by your operating income bracket. Okay, the next question that we have to answer live is, are work samples for the upcoming season or past seasons? What is recommended? So I would encourage you to think of work samples as helping the panelists understand your capacity for and your capacity to produce what you're proposing. So there is no requirement if they're for past or present or future programming. Really, it's just to give the panelists a sense of your work and what you do. So I guess the answer to that is it doesn't really matter as long as you think it helps the panelists understand the work that you produce and the public service that you're proposing. This next from announcement attendee, if the project is in the summer before we know whether we have an award, how can we fulfill the acknowledgement requirements? This is a great question. Just to say that if you have an activity that happens before you hear about an award and you aren't able to acknowledge us, don't worry about it. We completely understand that we're the ones who haven't told you whether or not you have an award. That will not be, we'll be able to see that during final reporting, and you will not be penalized for that. So do not feel like you have to guess at whether or not you have an award or include us just in case. This is another one. We filed a Form 990N in 2022. However, we now have a 990 now for 2023, 2024. Yes, if you filled the Form 990N in 2022, it sounds like you were incorporated as a nonprofit in the fiscal year that ended in 2022. What you will have to do is submit a treasurer's statement. What you can either do you can see we have a template for that you can find on our website, or you can use your own template, but that treasurer statement will detail your budget from FY 2022, so we can confirm your operating income. So if you submitted a 990N, that is totally fine. You just need to also submit an additional piece of documentation so we can see your income and expenses from that fiscal year broken out. Okay, this is a question from Susan. I find this confusing in terms of the outside professional services and outside expenses are costs. So what would be the source? I'm hoping for an example, please. So so when we say the source, we're just asking you to itemize. So outside professional services. So I'm going to just find your question again. Outside professional services are things like contractors. So your auditor or anybody that is not on a 1099 anybody that's not on a W-2, sorry, but rather on a 1099, that's an outside professional source, so an auditor, or maybe you have an electrician that came in and did some work, or that you have on retainer, or maybe a teaching artist sometimes are on outside professional services. You say outside expenses, I'm going to guess maybe you say other expense, you mean other expenses? That's just any expense that's not covered in one of our other line items. So for those costs, when we're saying the source, we're just meaning what are the source of those costs? Please itemize those for us. Okay, now that we are submitting a 3-year application, can you speak to any substantial changes to the application where there once multiple projects and now is there one project for which we need to submit budget inflow? Hopefully this question makes sense. I'm taking over as a grant writer and not sure if there have been substantial changes since 2019. Yes, there have been quite substantial since 2019. The one you list here is one of those changes, that there used to be multiple projects, and now we just ask for one. We only allow you to submit one project. I won't get into all the details of these, but I recommend you check out our website, and there is a reforms page there, which details the large suite of reforms we rolled out in FY 2023. There are changes to how we allocate funding, and a whole suite of things that it's, again, hard to go into detail here, but that is one change. There used to be multiple projects and now there are not.
Dylan, sorry, this is Laudan. Can I just add another quite
Please.
small added part of this answer? When you say you're submitting a 3-year application, just want to make it clear to everyone. You are submitting, when you submit the application, you should be submitting the proposed services for just fiscal year 25. Because you are eligible for multi-year support, you might get a multi-year grant, but your application should not be for 3 years worth of activity. It should just be for the proposed services for FY25. And then, because our grant agreements are 1 year at a time. So you'll submit an application, you'll say, what am I doing in 25? The panel will review it. They'll say, if they want, they'll score it based on the criteria. If you're funded, you'll get, and you're eligible for it, you'll potentially get that 3-year grant. And then every year for the renewal, you'll come back and say, okay, for next year, here's what I'm doing. But don't apply for 3 years worth of activity. I just wanted to make sure that was clarified for everybody who's on the call.
Yes, thank you. And I think I'm guessing this is the same anonymous attendee that is asking these questions. That too is a change. But no, that has always been true. Applications have always only been for the fiscal year that they're applying in. I also want to note, I see some people raising their hands. We are not going to be taking questions live. So if you have a question, please type it into the chat. We're not going to be calling on people to speak. So I see some raised hands, and just letting you know, we will not be taking questions that way. I'm going to go over to Stacy. My organization was fiscally sponsored in 2022. How should I handle financial documentation 990 info considering this? We've been registered as a 501c3 since mid-2023. This is a great question. And I do want to underline that you have to have been registered as a nonprofit in New York State in 2022, even if you were fiscally sponsored then. So if before you were 501c3, if you were an LLC, or if you were unincorporated or anything like that, you're not eligible to apply for funding. If that does apply to you, I actually would ask you to please, Stacy, please contact CDF Help Desk at culture.nyc.gov. That email is in the chat. And we can talk to you more about your specific documentation requirements here. Okay, moving on to Daniel's question. How many activities can reasonably be included on the current one project process? For instance, if you provide visual arts residencies and a gallery that features work created through the residencies, could those both be covered in the project, or does that sound like either or to you? This is a great question. Daniel, it might make sense for you to reach out to the help desk, or if you're already in touch with one of us, it sounds like you might be. We can get more into the details, but I will say that one project can cover anything as long as it kind of makes sense as a project, and as long as you feel like you can cover enough detail for all of those components of it. So again, maybe it might make sense to connect with us offline, but it doesn't sound like an either or, as long as you feel like you can address all the criteria for all of the components of your project within the space. Paula, if we receive multi-year funding, can we apply for City Council discretionary funding within the multi-year grant period? Yes, you can apply for City Council discretionary funding each year, and that will be, if you are successful, that you'll either receive initiatives based on the year, or your member item would be added to your specific fiscal year CDF award, depending on if you're successful or not. But yeah, the City Council discretionary funding will you have to apply every year and can be added to the specific year's CDF award. Christine will be able to see this recording after. Yes, we are. If you'll give us a little bit, we will. Will we be able to see this recording after we refer back while working on application? Yes, we are recording this session. If you give us a couple days, we just need to caption it so it's as accessible as possible for everybody. It will then be uploaded to our YouTube account and linked to on our website, so you can see it there. How do you determine 2-year grantees and 3-year grantees? This is a great question. There are no 2-year grantees. All multi-year awards are 3-year grants. In order to be eligible for a 3-year grant, you need to have received a CDF baseline award in one of the past 3 fiscal years. I'm just going to double check myself because this is different this year. Yes. Okay. So you have to have received a CDF award in one of the past 3 fiscal years, a CDF baseline award in one of the past 3 fiscal years. If this is true of you, and if you receive funding, you will automatically get a 3-year grant. There's a 3-year grant. There's no separate determination for some people who do or some people who do not get 3-year grants. If you're eligible for a 3-year grant, and if you receive funding, you get a 3-year grant. And once again, that eligibility is you must have received CDF baseline funding in one of the past 3 fiscal years, and at least one of the past 3 fiscal years. A baseline grant, thank you for this question, is the funding that is provided by the panel. So it does not include any safety net funding, any member item funding, or any other additional funds added at adoption. Your baseline award is the grant amount that is awarded by the panel. If you are unsure if you received a baseline grant, you can either contact your program officer, which Louise is me, or you can look at your award letter from previous fiscal years, and it will say CDF baseline amount. How do we look up who our grant officer is? You can look at your most recent award letter, or you can look at your most recent notification letter. So if you applied an FY24 and did not receive funding, or if you did receive funding, your program officer is listed on that award letter, which you can download from our portal. Additionally, if you are a new applicant, meaning if you've never applied to us before, you are not assigned a grant officer, and we recommend you reach out to CDF Help Desk at culture.nyc.gov to be connected with someone who can help you. We don't assign program officers until after the application process is over, when you receive those notification letters. But again, if you reach out to the help desk, somebody is more than happy to help you. To apply to be a panelist, you have to both live and work in New York City, or is it okay to just work in New York City? Thank you. That's a great question. We're just looking for folks who have knowledge of the New York City arts and cultural field. So there is no live or work requirements, although if you do neither, then you're probably not going to have knowledge of that. But there's no, you don't have to have an address within the 5 boroughs in order to apply if you can demonstrate in other ways that you have knowledge of the arts and cultural field. Okay, I don't see any other questions in this white box that I'm looking at. So I'm going to wrap us up. If those are all the questions, I want to take one more second to say thank you again to Battery Dance for letting us use their video at the beginning of this presentation. And thank you to all of you for attending our first of these webinars. Once you complete your application, please be sure to fill out the application survey. A link will be provided in the confirmation email you receive after your application is submitted. We really pay attention to these surveys. We comb them deeply, and we try to be as responsive to them as we can. And so we really value feedback on your experience, and they're completely anonymous, so they're no way tied to funding outcomes or allocations. And just some final reminders, we have a list of tools on our website that you should definitely use. As I mentioned, this session was recorded and will be linked on our website. The video is closed captions that can be translated into different language in the YouTube interface. Once again, please give us a couple days because it does take a little bit of manual labor to get that done, but keep an eye out and it will be posted. FAQs are posted on our website. Look for our emails for updates to the FAQs and reminders during the open application period. One more shout out to the budget and application worksheets. Use them. We think they're tremendously helpful. There's a panelist view sample you can find on our website. And finally, if we didn't get to your question, which it looks like maybe we did, or if you have other questions, you can always attend a virtual office hour. This year we have 2 scheduled, one on June 6th at 6 p.m. and one on June 18th at 12:30 p.m. These registrations, which you can register for these at links on our website. This is a chance to connect directly in a Zoom meeting with some program officers. And if you need any other support, please contact your program officer or the help desk. Once again, that email is cdfhelpdesk@culture.nyc.gov. You can see that email on the slide. You can see that email in the chat. You can find that email plastered all over our website. We're here to help. Thank you again, and please everybody have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.